Hi Sharon,
Hi, Shannon, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Not so bad, not so bad. It's stopped raining at least. We've got some sunshine.
Oh, how lovely. Yesterday, I think it was just very rainy until about 3 o'clock, and then it was like the heavens opened, and then I woke up this morning and I actually put my sunglasses on. I was so happy.
Make
Oh,
most of the summer whilst we can, because I suspect autumn's not too far away.
absolutely. Now, autumn is my favourite season. I love the colours. I love how everybody gets really cosy. I absolutely love it. So I am waiting for the jumper weather to arrive, but it is really nice to have the sunshine for a little bit longer. Definitely in
Yeah,
September as well.
yes, make the most of it.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And how is everything you're based in Yorkshire?
Yes, I'm based just outside Harrogate, in Yorkshire, North Yorkshire. Um, yes, it's beautiful here today, actually. So I think once this is done, and I've got another couple of meetings after this, I think I'll get myself out into the garden. Lots to do out there, unfortunately.
I'm very jealous. I'd love to spend the day in my garden at the moment. Like you, it is a never ending task
Yeah.
of just so much to do.
Yes, I made the mistake of starting about 16 different projects all at once. And of course, haven't finished any of them. And then finish them, the weather's not right. So have to wait for the right weather to get cracking.
No, I completely agree. It's one of those things. I've got so many projects as well that are not finished, are half done, and then the weather has just been a bit off, hasn't it, for the last couple of weeks?
It has. And I've not been here either, which hasn't helped.
Yeah, don't show off with you going abroad. I'm very jealous.
Sadly back now, but there we go.
Amazing. So we've got lots of questions that have been sent in by our lovely audience and by your audience as well. But to begin with, I do want to just to let everybody know who's watching who you are. How did you get into interior design?
Well, interior design has always been very much a hobby for me. We moved into this house over 20 years ago, and at the time, we couldn't really afford to do anything with it. So we just had to live here and wait until we could afford to do the bits that we wanted. So, as I say, we've been here 20 years, and we're still not finished. And of course, it's the never-ending problem. As soon as you finish one room, you have to start again at the beginning. Um, but until October 2020, I was working full time as a solicitor. And it's fair to say that it took up pretty much all my time. So interior design was very much a hobby, very much escapism, and something that I really enjoyed doing at the weekends, holidays, forcing my husband to do whilst I wasn't around, that sort of thing. Um, and over the years, I think it's fair to say that my style has very much developed and changed. What I would have chosen, perhaps when we first bought a house in the mid 1990s, we were talking yesterday about the fact I painted a hallway bright yellow, and it was very much the colour of the moment. I'm not quite sure I'd do that now. It would look great, but I just don't think it would suit this style of house at the moment.
It is so interesting because when we were talking yesterday, I grew up with a very bright yellow bathroom, and it was so fashionable at the time. And now you wouldn't think about putting every wall yellow, and even the bath was yellow, and the sink was yellow. You wouldn't even think about doing that now. It is just so interesting how trends come and go. But then there are certain things that are timeless, that are classic, that do end up staying in fashion in time immemorial.
Well, I remember back in the 90s when we bought our first home, and we furnished it pretty much entirely from IKEA and a bit of Laura Ashley. And at the time, at the IKEA strapline was very much chuck out your chintz. I think that was the phrase they used. And it's funny how things come around because that's chintz and pattern very has been again for some time. Um, Obviously, still very much the Scandi vibe in fashion as well, but not quite as pared down as it was then, as we were being encouraged to go.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting. I do remember there was a stage that we had it was very neutral and white and monochromatic and Scandi. and and that was so fashionable. But now I feel like people are getting more creative with colour, and I absolutely adore that. I love that just injection of colour into people's homes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, you can see from the walls in here, we've very much embraced the dark decor in here, and we've got some of the rooms which are obviously a bit lighter. But yes, I mean, the dark decor is something that 20 years ago really wasn't in. But now it's massive, and I mean, for me personally, I think it looks absolutely fabulous.
I completely agree. We're in the middle of decorating our lounge, and we're looking for a very dark olive green colour, because it just makes the room so much more cosier, having those dark colours, and then you can lift it so well with just your furniture and your furnishings and make it such a cozy place.
Yes, so it looks less like a bat cave and more, say the phrase, more like a sort of a classy gentleman's club instead.
Yeah, and that is so fascinating, actually, seeing how this style is very much the 19th century, early 20th century, kind of the William Morris, John Ruskin arts and crafts style, is just such a timeless look. And yes. I absolutely adore that.
Moment again as well. But not something that's ever really gone entirely out of fashion. It's one of those things, I think, that will always remain timeless and traditional. It's just a case of how you put it together with other bits and pieces that makes it more current.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, and that's something I'd love to dive into more with you as we go on with the live. Another question I did want to ask you is, we gave you the Daintree velvet fabric that you used to upholster your chair.
Yeah, I've got a sample of it here actually, because
it is absolutely gorgeous. I love that fabric.
And I chose it really because when I had the piece that I was upholstering in mind, I wanted it to go in here, and I wanted something quite dramatic, but that would fit with the colours in here, but still be quite bright. And
absolutely.
It's beautiful fabric. It's been beautiful to upholster with. And it's gorgeous, and it's had so many compliments already. Every time I drag my chair along to my upholstery class, everybody wants to know where I've got it from, because it's thing with velvet and any sort of upholstery fabrics, very tactile. So yeah, we all sit there having a stroke of it for a while before we get cracking.
It is such a soft fabric to touch. Oh my goodness! Whenever I photograph it, I just have to run my fingers through it, because it is just so beautiful. Such a lovely one. And with your upholstery, from my own experience, I find that quite difficult to learn how to do that. So, what is your process of doing upholstery? But also, do you find it hard? And is there any tips that you can recommend to anybody?
Well, I started by, first of all, my first experience of upholstery was when we were selling my dad's house, and it hadn't really been touched by him and my mum for about 20 years. So there was, for example, my brother's old bedroom had a very of-the-moment Man United headboard that I wasn't sure would really sell itself. So we decided to upholster it, and it was just a really simple job with a stapler. And I thought, actually, I quite enjoyed this. So I looked around, signed up for a local class, and that's where it all began, really. And I went along really just to learn some basic skills. But I think, like many of the other people that go along to the class, became immediately addicted. Even the horrible bits, of which there are many with upholstery, it's not an easy skill to learn, and it can become very time consuming. Particularly when you have to start stripping your existing piece. And if you've bought something or you have something in your house that's really old, stripping it inside is not an option. I mean, the chair that I upholstered, the traditional chair that I upholstered this with, it was stuffed with straw and horsehair. So when I took it apart, I had to do it outside, and the amount of staples that were in it, removing the staples, some people either love it, and the tacks either love it because it's quite therapeutic, or they hate it. It just takes forever. We have a bit of a competition in class as to who's removed the most staples and tacks from their existing project. And people will count them as they go along, because it does take such a long time. So the prep of the piece before you even start can take such a long time, but it's worth doing it properly, because that ends up being essentially the skeleton, the bones for your project. And if you don't do it properly, then your piece just won't come together as well as it should. I would say for anybody starting out, if you can sign up to a class, that's the best way to go. There are lots of tutorials on YouTube, which I've had a look at in between times as well, and I'm thinking, oh, I can't quite remember how Anya told me to do that. I better have a look. But the problem with that is there are so many different methods for doing the same thing, and some are better than others and some are more traditional than others. So it depends how much of a purist you want to be, especially if you're taking apart quite an old piece of furniture, like the nursery chair that I did for my Daintree fabric. I wanted to sort of do that justice. I'd start with a simple project first if you're going to do it. So a very plain headboard, a footstool, not something that has buttons in it or pleats, or has traditional springs in it, because all things like that just make it very, very difficult. And again, something that's relatively simple like a footstool, it's easy to prep it, so you can get onto the interesting bit quite quickly, so you're not losing interest before you've even got going, really. And in terms of fabric choices, that's quite important too. If you're starting out, don't go for anything stretchy. Trying to upholster with stretchy fabric is just a nightmare, because you do have to pull your fabric quite taut, but obviously you have to have a consistency in the tension. And if you're working with a stretchy fabric, it's very, very difficult to get that consistency of tension. Also try and avoid stripes and checks when you're first starting out, because trying to get those stripes and checks and the straight lines running straight and in the right place is more difficult than you think. You might think when you're starting out, yes, I've got that exactly where it should be, but then in the process of stretching the fabric and increasing the tension, you will inevitably end up pulling your straight lines out. So you can end up with something that looks straight, and by the time you've finished, you've got a line running from one corner to the other, and it's just completely out of kilter, and you end up having to start. So just make life difficult, as easy as possible and not difficult for yourself, by sticking with a simple fabric, something without too much stretch in it. And pattern is good. Pattern, as with fashion, pattern hides a multitude of sins. So pattern is always good. So that's a good way to start as well, to inject a bit of interest into the fabric without setting yourself up for errors and mistakes from the outset. It's also worthwhile investing in a few key tools that you will need. When I go to my upholstery class, we have a stapler that's connected to a big compression pump. I can't afford to buy one of those, so if I'm doing anything at home, I'll just use an electric stapler, or just even a handheld one for smaller projects. You don't get quite the same tension with it. So if you decide you're going to do armchairs and sofas and chaiselongs as a project, then it might be worth investing in a proper compression stapler. But otherwise, an electric one will do the job. You will also need, and I've brought a couple of my favourite bits along with me. These are great for getting out staples and tacks. You can see the sharp end of this one here goes underneath the staple. You can push it. This one is great for tacks. So you can see the little tack will go in the hole here. You will use your mallet as well, and this helps to lever them out. So that's the way, and that's what takes a while. And then anything that's really stubborn, I know this looks like a really awful dentist's tool. Actually, we're extracting really stubborn staples. So you've got half out, you grab hold of that, and then just a backwards and forwards movement, and gently ease it out without putting actual pressure on the wood itself and damaging the wood. And then my other favourite piece my tack hammer. And the best bit about this is that one end of it's magnetised, so you can use it to actually pick up your tacks as well. So that's quite useful. And I've bought all of these off Amazon, so they're really easy to get hold of. And also, if you're going to use my favourite fabric scissors, you always want a good clean cut. So for your finishing fabric, not so much for your calico that you do as your base, but for your finishing fabric, you always want a good pair of scissors as well. Those are my key pieces, and that I use all the time, and that I would really recommend someone invest in if they're thinking of doing this properly.
Well, you've certainly helped me, because I'm looking at updating my armchair in my lounge, and I was kind of looking at it, and I just had no idea where to start. And I would have picked, to be honest, the JF Ticking range that we've got is such a beautiful fabric, timeless, classic, goes with every interior design that you can think of. And I would have thought, oh, it's a stripe, that would have been an easy choice to make. But now you're making me realise actually probably not. I wouldn't be able to pattern match that on my first go.
Yeah, it's quite difficult, because it's not just, especially if you're doing an armchair, if you've got to think in terms of the stripes all have to meet. So all down the back of the armchair, and then along the front, and then down, and also the sides as well. So it ends up being quite complicated with checks and stripes. Make sure that they all fit together as they should.
Well, thank you. I'm sure there's lots of people watching that would have found that so interesting and also so informative. So thank you for letting us know all your tips and tricks for upholstery. I do really appreciate it.
Oh, well, I'm hoping out there addicted like me.
And another question before we get to our audience questions was, do you have any tips for DIY decor, but also doing DIY on a budget?
I mean, a lot of what we've done in here has been done on a budget. I'll go off into the stores I like and steal the look, and then think, right, I need to translate that into my own home without spending the vast amounts of money that would entail. So, for example, I saw a beautiful set of candlesticks in Neptune, but they were £145 for the three of them. And I'm not paying that for a set of 3 candlesticks. So I managed to source almost an identical size, again, a set of 3 from IKEA, that were £10. But instead of staying with the black that the IKEA ones in, I just sprayed them with some gold hammerite. And I've got one here, actually. I'll show you. This one. So this is the Neptune one. I mean, it's a lot lighter, obviously. You get what you pay for, I suppose. But without having to pay £145. So I had my set of £10 for my candles, my candles, and then my tin of primer and my tin of spray paint. So I've become very close friends with Annie Sloan and French Chic paint, and I use those to update lots of bits of furniture. Things like filing cabinets from IKEA, and they like to give them a splash of colour. But also Place and Gumtree have very much become my friend. I'm not quite sure how we all coped before Facebook Marketplace when we were doing it on a budget. But my very close friend and fellow interiors friend, Laura, she's also got an interiors account, Renovationcation, pretty much did up an entire house through Facebook Marketplace. And pretty much everything that they put into their house was either free or picked up for just a few pounds. So she has become my guru and inspiration for Facebook Marketplace, and how to find the best deals. So that's always a really, really good source. What else do I do? Really, it's just reutilising things we've got in the house already. So, I mean, you use the phrase, I suppose, shop your home. So things that you've already got that you have in another room that you can repurpose in another room and just give it a different look. Or starting from scratch. If you want something new, again, you can buy from IKEA and update, either with new handles or just giving it a paint. Again, another account that I follow all the time, which is fantastic for IKEA upcycles, is Crack the Shutters. She has the most amazing IKEA upcycles, and you would not you wouldn't recognise the piece from how it started out.
Wow, that just sounds amazing. And I've recently moved into my first home, and you kind of look at how much everything is and want to be as sustainable as you can. So reutilising what you've already got, but also being very clever with where you're getting your furniture from is, I think, so important. And definitely kind of looking at, for example, your current curtains and thinking, how can I make this lift without having to go out and buy a completely new set, just make your own, or all of that little upcycling that you can do. So I think just so incredible for your home.
Well, I've become I was not a seamstress at all, but when I started getting quotes for bespoke curtains, because the windows in our house are so massive that trying to buy something ready-made was virtually impossible. And when we had our new office done, I had a particular idea for how I wanted the curtains. And when you're getting in quotes for £600, £700 for just what you think is going to be a cheap pair of curtains, you think, right, I'm going to teach myself how to use a sewing machine and how to make curtains. So I have a little sewing machine that I got from John Lewis in the sale that was £35 many years ago, and it's only a little one. But it's great for hemming curtains, putting on tab tops. So we've done a lot that way. And the other thing we've also done is when it comes to buying paint, I was shocked at how expensive some of the Farrow and Ball and the like paint are. And we discovered, obviously, the B&Q paint desk, where they will mix any colour for you with a sample, and it's sometimes not entirely the same, but it's as close as that. If it's that broad colour that you're wanting, it's a really good way of doing it. And in fact, local B&Q in Harrogate even has the Farrow and Ball names saved in a special computer file, because they get requested so often. They'll probably get sued if I let them. There we go. But that's it. Again, you can save an absolute fortune when you're paying £70 or more for a paint, and you can get it half price. It makes a big difference.
Well, it's just so interesting, all your tips and tricks for doing it on a budget, and I didn't think like that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think lots of people watching will find that so interesting and so useful, especially as we go into the winter months. So thank you so much. And actually, we've been so busy this week because we've got so many questions that have been sent in by both our audiences, and I do want to start to go into our questions from the audience, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Amazing. So the first one that we've got up here is quite a special one, because this person has just recently updated their kitchen and they're not sure about what colour they should be choosing. So they've recently gone for a navy for their fitted kitchen with some light grey walls. So thinking about the navy and the light grey, what other colour would you suggest they bring into it as they want to do that? And what would you suggest?
Well, I had a look at this, and I suppose it depends at the end of the day what sort of look they're going for and how modern or how traditional they want to be, or how much of a statement they want to make. So, I have one of these, which is brilliant. It's this Farrow and Ball colour chart. And when I'm doing it at my house, when I'm doing any room, I never really leave home without it, because it's got all the different colours in, so you can sit them against each other. And if you take here, for example, a grey and a navy that they're maybe doing their kitchen in, and think what colours sit with it, so you can go through and look at the different colours. My initial thought would be, I love this pink, which is quite a soft colour to go with it. So that, and that fits nicely with them. But if you wanted to make that pop a little bit more, you could go for a brighter pink. There's a really nice Farrow and Ball called, I think it's called Rangwali or something like that. And that's much more of an accent pink. Just seeing if I can find it. Or if you wanted to go really bright, that's the Rangwali, that one. and that sits quite nicely with the navy
Wow.
as well. But if you wanted to go really out there, this one always goes really well, I think, with navy. That one, which is Charlotte's Locks.
Love
I think you have to be quite out there to go for that sort of colour, because it's quite a lot brighter. But yes, anything like sort of the sulking room pink, which is still quite warm in tone and doesn't jar too much, I think that would be my choice. But then I'm a complete sucker for pink, so I try to introduce it into the house wherever I can, but I have to call it different names so that my husband doesn't say, "Oh, not another room in pink." Oh, setting class to this colour. It's not pink. And
I'm with you. I love a blush. I love the warm tones that you can do, especially if you're contrasting it with the blue. It does have a nice complement to any room that you do choose it for.
Yeah, I mean, I just used recently in the summer house when I did that up inside a green paint company called Hellebore, and it's the most gorgeous pink, and I think that would look lovely with navy as well.
Yes, no, I completely agree. And whenever anybody asks me questions about their kitchen, I'm such a sucker for a nice Roman blind or a nice roller blind, and adding just different types of texture in your kitchen with materials. I think it's such a nice way to make it just feel a little bit more cozy in what is a very normally a very quite cold place, the kitchen. So I do love whenever anybody adds furnishings, definitely recommend a nice blind.
Yes, and open furnishing, open shelving as in kitchens is always nice as well, just for a little bit of styling.
No, I completely agree.
Functional, but things that just look pretty and a bit of colour.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because anything functional just gets messed up in my kitchen straight away. Yeah, my tip for series is don't have a husband and kids. That's the way forward.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you. I think they'll really appreciate your answer there. With going on to colours, another question that did pop up quite a lot was, how do you introduce pattern into your homes? I think it's quite easy to just think to try to keep the pattern to a minimum, but I personally feel like you should add a pattern you can add it in such a nice way. How would you introduce it into your home?
How I start is I look at the room I'm working with and the colour that I've got. So, for example, in here, the predominant colour is the strong green. And then when I'm looking at pattern, I will look at ones that draw out that colour. So it necessarily the dominant colour within the pattern, but it's there so that when you put it with the dominant colour, it immediately draws out that other colour. And then if you're wanting to introduce other pattern, if you keep that consistency of tone so that they all sit together. And then if you want to introduce some sort of accent colour, you can pick out one of the other colours that sits within that fabric that will automatically, because it fits within the pattern, will sit with your other colours. So, for example, I mean, I've still got my bit of Daintree fabric here. This has got so many beautiful colours in it. And it's got this gorgeous pink here that I like. So that would sit beautifully if I wanted to introduce another tone in here or another pattern. So maybe a throw in some of this pink as well, so that it would start to pull all the different colours together and the different patterns. And I'm not a purist in any sense in terms of only having one pattern. I'm quite happy to mix different patterns, but it's about maintaining that colour palette and the tones so that they sit together. And if in doubt, really, it's just a case of sitting them all next to each other and on top of each other so you can see whether they jar or whether actually you get that blend and that look that's easy on the eye.
It's so interesting, because I know a lot of people have said to me the best thing to do is just stick to a rule of three, and then within that you've got that look, you've got your three colours that are in your room, but because they're so broad, you can add, feel free to mix it up with the type of tone. So I think a lot of people find that so useful, and hopefully for myself have a little confidence to add some more patterns in my home.
Yeah, I think the rule of three is a good one actually, because I think if you start introducing more colours than that, it ends up being a little bit of a mishmash. I mean, I know there are some schemes that will be very much. I mean, there's some fantastic maximalist schemes out there, but I don't think maximalism is a talent of mine. I think if I go along that route, I think my house would end up looking a little bit like a jumble sale that had exploded.
Yeah, I know, I agree with you. I would love to be able to pull it off, but I don't think I would be able to.
Yeah.
So I definitely stick to my three, right? And so another question we've got, and I think for me personally, as we go into autumn, something that I'm thinking about is how do you make sure that when you're updating your home, that it does stay in style and you choose things that are classic and are timeless?
I mean, from my perspective, I've always very much gone with what I like as opposed to what's a trend. And I think, although I've seen things that are trends and that I like, and therefore will be happy to introduce them to my home. For example, paneling. Paneling is a massive trend at the moment. But because paneling is such a traditional thing, and it might go out of fashion as being a trend, I don't think it will ever look out of place. Because it's one of those things that's always been around. I think the key is if you're going to adopt a trend that's very, very full on at any particular time, it's about doing it in small doses and inexpensive doses, so that if you feel that you need to change it because you get very bored of it, or it's just so out of fashion you can't live with it anymore, then it's an easy update. So if it's a particular colour, then maybe just introduce a few accents in that colour into your home, or even paint a wall, because it's not overly expensive to repaint a wall. But for example, particular kitchen or bathroom trends, I remember not that long ago there was a big trend for bright red gloss kitchens. I remember Magnet, bright red gloss kitchen, and I thought at the time, it looks fantastic, but if in 2 years that trend is no longer around, that's going to be quite expensive to rectify. If you want to do that, go for a kitchen that you can paint, and then you can update the colour if the fashions change. So yes, I'm obviously influenced by different trends that I see on Instagram and the handling, like the different colours. But if I'm going to do anything that's expensive, like my kitchen, like my bathrooms, I try to pick something that's a little bit more timeless, and I can use trends and updates in other cheaper ways in that room.
No, I completely agree, and I always suggest to anybody who's looking to give whatever room in their house an update to choose things like a toile or a check or a linen or a ticking or a striped fabric, because they are just such classic patterns, never out of style, can be used for so many different interior designs as well. So those are my five that I tend to tell lots of people as if they ask that question.
Well, I always take the view that traditional never goes out of fashion, because it is, by its very nature, it's always in fashion. It's just about updating it with different colours and accents alongside to keep it current.
No, I completely agree. And the next question actually is quite relevant, is so how do you mix different patterns and materials together in your home?
It's very much dependent on season and feel, really. So, and the function of the room. So, for example, in here, which is our living room, I'm quite happy to have, and they fit in heavier fabrics like velvets, wools, as opposed to lighter cottons. So curtains are heavier fabrics. They're a damask. And a wool-based sofa. But if I was, for example, in my kitchen, those would be too heavy for in there. I wouldn't want anything, for example, that I couldn't really wash, and couldn't easily be updated if it got damaged. but in terms of putting textures together, again, I'm not a purist in it. It's all got to be of the same texture. I love, I mean, particularly in my bedroom, on my bed. My husband gets sick to death of the fact that I've got lots and lots of different cushions, all of different patterns, all of slightly different shades, all textures, and then different throws in different textures. And I think that layered look, with the different textures and the different patterns, just looks great and looks so cozy and quite opulent without actually.
No, I completely agree. And this actually goes really nicely into the next question, which is adapting your home on a budget for each season. And something that I do is I love that layered look, and it's just swapping out the types of materials that I choose. So, for example, in my bed, I don't tend to have a throw during the summer, but then I add that look in the wintertime to make it feel more cozy and just to make the house and my room just seem a little bit more different as the seasons go on. And how would you adapt your home on a budget for each season?
I don't redecorate. I know some people will redecorate rooms entirely. I haven't the time or the money to do that. So it ends up being in just like little touches. So, for example, I'm quite a big fan of faux flowers. I always have a wreath on the front door. So I'll update the wreath. And the beauty with faux flowers is you can bring them out next year and they're still alive. So, and you can just add some extra bits to it, and really good ones, really cheaply actually now as well. So, for example, at the moment, because I'm still in sort of summer season in my living room, I'm very much sort of this sort of flower. But going into autumn, and one of my friends will recognise this because she bought these for me when I left my last job. I have these, which are sort of berries instead. So they're a really easy update, and I do like sort of berries like this in a really nice vase. So that's a sort of introduces an autumnal look really, really easily. And again in textures and colours, so swapping out a few cushions, maybe introducing some darker tones, some richer fabrics like velvets or wools as opposed to the cottons. I even have a sort of a fur throw that comes out as well when it gets, not only because it's lovely to wrap myself in, but because it's gorgeous. But having that big fur throw that's, you know, something that you could imagine trekking around Iceland with, isn't something you necessarily want on the bed in summer, but looks great in winter. So that gets put away into the storage bed in the spare room over the summer, and I suspect in the next couple of weeks it'll be dragged out again, and that'll look in the bedroom.
No, I completely agree. It is all about those finishing touches and just even adding just, I don't know, just a lovely cushion which is brighter or more tropical themed or more modern in the summertime, and then toning it down with the colours. Even fabrics, for example, I absolutely love. I've got a gorgeous pair of homemade cushions that I made myself about 10 years ago with a beautiful, it's almost like a kingfisher blue velvet, and they always come out as soon as I put the radiators on. That's it, they're coming out, and I always then add a nice check throw. And it is so important with your finishing touches just to be mindful of what the colour is going to be doing, trying to emulate as well with your berries that beautiful sunset orange, emulating the outside and bringing it in, I think is such a powerful interior decor tip that you can give people.
Yes, and candles everywhere. You can never go wrong with a candle. And again, different seasons. It's amazing how different scents make such a difference actually to the feel of the room.
Absolutely. My husband, no doubt, is going to be sighing when my beautiful red candles that smell of cinnamon that come out normally around about November time. It just makes the house smell of Christmas, and it's very homey, very cozy. But he sighs every time they do.
They're used to it now.
Yeah, they should be.
We've trained them.
So I'm actually afraid that I couldn't. We have run out of time, so I couldn't actually get through all of the questions that all of our audience have sent in to us. So I do apologise if your question wasn't answered today. But I just wanted to thank you, Sharon, so much for joining us today. It has been a fantastic chat with you about interior design. Have you got any last tips and tricks for our audience?
All I'd say is just don't be afraid. Just throw yourself into it. And if you make mistakes, don't be afraid to undo them. I've lived with things in the past that I thought, oh, I wished I'd not done that. And I've redone it and then thought, I don't know why I didn't do that sooner. Sometimes you've just got to accept that you've made a mistake and you just get on with it. Repaint your ceiling white if that's what needs to be done. But yes, just don't be afraid. Just throw yourself in. Just be creative. Use your imagination, and it's amazing actually where you can find yourself.
No, I completely agree. Being confident to get it wrong, because most of the time you will realise that you do have an eye for things, and it will just look fab when you're finished.
Definitely.
So thank you everybody for joining. If you do have any further questions for me or Shannon, Sharon, my name's Shannon. Please do send us a message. And thank you again, Sharon, for joining us today. I really do appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.